You're about to listen to a podcast recording of the recent Connecticut Association of Municipal Agents for the Elderly at their fall workshop in Glastonbury. The speakers you're about to hear were on the panel for advocacy. The moderator was Cathy Peck of Montville Senior Center, and the speakers were Senator Cathy Osten, co-chair of Appropriations, Peaches Quinn, the Connecticut Coalition on Aging, Judy Jencks of the Jencks Network and the website seniorcenterct.org, and Nancy Lisee of Senior Services.
A few notes before we get started. First, Senator Heather Summers could not be here today, nor do we have a representative from Joe Courtney's office. And the order of our speaker has changed for a little bit, but everyone will speak. And right now I'd like to ask each member of the panel to introduce themselves.
I'm Cathy Osten. I'm the state senator for the 19th District. I represent towns of Marlborough, Hebron, Lebanon, Columbia, Sprague, Franklin, Norwich, Lisbon, and a little bit of Montville.
I'm Nancy Lisee with Senior Resources, and we have a 56-town region. So I'm not going to name the towns. I'll just name the counties. New London County, Windham County, Middlesex County, and 5 towns in Tolland County.
I'm Judy Jencks. I think most of you know me. I am your Director of Advocacy. I was the Senior Center Director in Lisbon for a number of years. I now have the website seniorcenterct.org.
Hello, everyone. I am Peaches Quinn, resident of the City of New Haven, president of the statewide Connecticut Coalition on Aging. We do advocacy as well as public education on critical topics important to older adults in the state.
Okay, Senator Cathy Osten is going to speak first, but we're going to ask that everyone hold your questions until the end, and you'll certainly get a chance to ask everyone on the panel questions.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about appropriations. I'm the co-chair of Appropriations. I'm also the vice chair of Labor and Public Employees. I'm the vice chair of Housing. I sit on Transportation as a regular member, and I sit on Veterans as a regular member. And I'm on a host of different other committees that talk about specific issues, like the Rural Caucus and a few others. I think I'm up to 7 or 8, maybe a little bit more. Nonetheless, I am the co-chair of Appropriations, and I am on my. I finished 2 bipartisan budgets over the last 2 years. That had things in it that I liked and things in it that I didn't like. And that is true on everybody that was in appropriations. So that means to me that it's probably a near perfect budget because there were things we didn't like and things we did like all across the board. That means everybody had a say in something on the budget. So essentially, the budget is comprised of 4 pieces. Generally speaking, there's a whole host of different subcategories within each of them, but I liken the budget to a pie cut in 4s. So there's a section that's on Medicare, Medicaid, which houses nursing home care, and any other program that has to do with Medicare or Medicaid is involved in that quadrant of the budget. There's a section on the budget or a quadrant on the budget that has to do with pensions and debt service. So there are 5 or 6 pensions that are in there, but essentially 2 that are the largest piece, and that is the state employee pension plan and the teacher's retirement. And then there's debt service. Debt service is made up of 2 major components and then a whole host of smaller components. One of those components is school construction. That's one of the largest pieces of debt service. And then, of course, roads, bridges, culverts, all the things that come out of concrete. I actually happen to like infrastructure a lot, so I really like that piece of the budget. So I like to fix things. And then on the bottom, what I would call the bottom half of the budget is aid to municipalities, and that includes educational aid. That's about $5 billion out of the $20 billion budget. So literally 25% of the budget relates to aid to municipalities revolving around municipal aid and educational aid. Essentially, the ECS, that does not include community colleges or state universities or UConn. That is not in that quadrant of the budget. And then the last quadrant of the budget is state agencies, state police, Department of Transportation, Department of Corrections, Department of Social Services, anything that has to do with that piece of the budget. Essentially, the state agency part of the budget has remained flat. Now, many of over the last number of years, the growth has been, generally speaking, in the debt service and pension portion of the budget, and some in the Medicaid portion of the budget. Municipal aid has remained flat and is starting to decrease, in part because of the pressures on the top half of the budget, essentially because there's more need in the Medicaid, Medicare, and pension costs due to some 70 to 80 years of non-payment has led to the problem that we have right now. So some of the things that we have done in the budget, people often ask, this will not be specific to senior services, but I think that you have a very good constituent block. So one of the things that was cut out of the budget and eventually restored was the Medicare Savings Program. You all know that. That was $130 million that was put back in the budget. That's a large chunk of a budget, and when people are looking to carve into the budget to decrease costs, it is always going to come up as a subject to be talked about. I strongly suggest you pay attention to that over the next number of years. Our Medicare Savings Program in Connecticut is higher than most other states, in part, I would say, because our cost of living is higher. But when people are looking to decrease costs, it's $130 million, and it's something that people will look at. And I strongly suggest you activate your constituent base over and over again on a program that you would like to see kept. And you, again, I point out that seniors vote, and seniors can be active in the political process and are. So what have we done on the other? I'll take the half that talks about pensions and state agencies. So on the state agency side, many regular residents, not necessarily any one constituent group, have talked about decreasing the size of government. So right now, we are at the 1960s, 1970s level of state employees. That is not according to me. That is according to the Office of Fiscal Analysis, which means that they look at where we are, what we have, and what are we doing, and that's been researched by many of the editorial sections of many newspapers across the state who have looked at what are we doing, how are we doing it, and are we actually addressing some of the concerns that people have. So, for example, when people call a state agency, most of them have 25% or 50% less state employees. That's, sort of just a fact, and when you have less people, it might take you a little bit longer to do some of the work that's necessary to be done. And so that's something that's actively going on. People have looked at the State Employee Bargaining Agent Coalition. There's been some talk about that agreement that happened, and they say that the hands of the next executive have been tied. But fully 14% of the budget could be laid off tomorrow and are not covered by the no layoff agreement. I would not suggest that we lay off 14% of the people that are left when we've already dropped the number of people that we have. For example, I always talk about the public safety ends of things, but we used to have 1,248 troopers in the state. It's usually a grandson or two that's calling me. It's not, they're down to now 900. So that's 250 less troopers. Takes 9 months to get a trooper to be alone in a vehicle. So 6 months of on-the-job training and 3 months, 6 months of classes and 3 months of on-the-job training. In addition, that does not count the lead up that needs to be done. They have to pass a test, they have to pass a physical exam, they have to pass a psychiatric exam, background check. There's a whole slew of things that have to happen, which add in another 6 months. The class that's currently going on has 20 troopers in it. We have more than that retiring between now and January 1st. I use that as an example because it's very clear, very concise, and you can see the cost of that. Some of the other things that people have asked to look at, what are we doing about the long-term debt that we have in the state revolving around pensions? On the state employee side, we have started to stabilize that fund. We have decreased what is called the return on investment, and we did that so that we were not incurring costs by overly inflating what we were getting on investing the funds that are there. So it was at 8%, it's now at 6.9%, a more achievable number. In addition to that, we have employees now that work for the state are paying more in healthcare costs and prescription drug costs. All new employees are on a hybrid 401k, and the prior pension before that, the Tier 3 pension, essentially pays for itself by employees. And lastly, I would say on the pension side of things that I point to the only way to take care of that debt service on the state employee side is to not pay current retirees. That's not something I would suggest us doing either. That is what's going on with that. On the teachers' retirement, there's still a lot of work to be done on the teachers' retirement. We need to address the return on investment so it's more applicable. Many people are considering moving over the assets of the lottery into the teachers' retirement. That is what other states have done, and that has brought them up to a more fully funded pension plan. They also have the same problem that we had by 70 or 80 years of non-payment of the state's portion, which is, by the way, not any one party has done this. It's been Republican governors, it's been Democratic governors, Republican legislatures, and Democratic legislatures. There's been very little time that there has been a one-party rule in the General Assembly. I would say the person that's paid our debt the most has been Governor Malloy. He is the one who said, I will not sign a budget unless you're paying your debt. And that's what rose up to public knowledge how bad that debt was, because he was requiring it be paid, and that's just sort of where it is. On the debt service, school construction, instead of allowing people to build Taj Mahal schools now, new schools, that not ones that are already gone through the approval process, but from last year on, anything that started the approval process will have cookie cutter kinds of designs so that you're not having to have these big designs now. That does not mean that, it's not even a grandson. It's not even, if they wanted to build something that the town wanted that was more expensive, then you could actually do that, but it would not be on the state's dime. It would be on the local municipality's dime. So I want to talk a little bit about senior, the expenditures in the budget that relates to senior services. And I think that that's something that we really need to sort of pay attention to, because it comes in different pots. It's not just in one area. So you have your Medicaid, Medicare expenditures that happen. You have that has been fixed this last year. Your rental assistance, which helps many seniors out, that's been fixed. These are all things that have to be paid attention to as we move through the process. We are going to see a deficit in the next number of years. We are also going to see money that's in the rainy day fund based on some of the policies that were enacted over the last 2 years. We'll be over $1 billion in the rainy day fund for the first time in more than a decade. That's based on the policies that were passed on something called the volatility cap. But every one of the expenditures that happen for seniors is looked at with the mind's eye is, can we do it in a regional fashion? Can we do it more effectively? And is this program still have a good return on investment? Personally, I go to all 10 of my senior centers that are in all 10 of my towns to talk to seniors, and go to some of the senior resources folks and talk to people in general about senior programs. I recommend that you keep an eye on all the different pots, to include the transportation modes on the elderly and disabled transportation. It's a small dollar amount, but in the next couple of years, small and large dollar amounts are going to be looked at. I don't want to take up everybody's time, so that's my issues right now. Next.
Thank you.
Nancy?
I just realized I'm nowhere near as exciting as Cathy. So today, we're just going to briefly talk about relationship building, and you'll learn more about this as your next segment of open enrollment for Medicare Advantage plans and Part D comes into play. Relationship building on a one-on-one advocacy situation is a process. It just doesn't happen immediately. Sometimes it is a visit with a phone call and emails afterwards. But building a relationship, you have to establish trust. So establishing trust is really key to relationship building. And what's an advantage for Senior Resources is our services are free of charge, and we're not selling anything. So that pretty much builds trust almost immediately. Know your subject matter. It's very, very difficult for folks to understand what you've learned in the last 30 years that you're explaining to them in 10 minutes. When you're looking at the subject, you want to make sure you carve out the pieces that they need to know. And the difficult piece, I think, for myself is I want to tell them everything I know in 5 minutes, which probably that takes up all the time that I have. Also, knowing the process, you probably won't know all the details, but knowing the process to help an individual in a one-on-one advocacy situation helps. Just knowing who to go to, who your partners are. Relating information is one thing, but relating accurate information and getting the job done quickly with the facts helps to help the individual in a number of ways. It could be a financial savings. It could be choosing the right product for their individual needs. And when you're dealing with folks that come to you with varied backgrounds, some have professional, capabilities that they come to you with, and they have knowledge in so many areas, but they're looking to you to solve in some cases, their Medicare issues. And it's not unusual when we get folks that call Senior Resources and say, I have a PhD in rocket science, and I don't understand Medicare. So we try to help them in those ways. And I will put a plug in for the agency. We really do a good job.
You do.
I'm done.
Oh, okay. Okay, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some campaigns that we have done. In southeastern Connecticut, we have a group of senior center directors that meet on a semi-informal basis. They sort of are colleagues to each other. And a number of years ago, CONPACE was a program in the state that some of you remember. And what had happened is the income limit was staying the same. And so people were getting pushed off as their Social Security went up or their interest went up, and they were losing a very valuable program. And I forgot, CONPACE it was a prescription program. It was the precursor to the MSP program. And so I went to Edith Prague, who was our senator before Cathy Osten, and I said, I don't understand why the income guideline isn't being raised. And she took the time to explain it all to me, and I asked a million questions. She answered them all, and I realized what was happening is there was legislators that wanted to raise the income guideline, but the Speaker of the House at the time would not introduce it to the floor. And because it wasn't being brought to the floor, they couldn't act on it. So I asked Edith, so if I was to start contacting people, how would I do that? And who do I need to contact? And who's the most important? And all of those things. And I got really creative, and I created this master list of return address labels. And so a certain number of them went to the governor, a certain number went to Kevin Sullivan, who was the Speaker of the House, and senators and all the key players. And then I sat down with my seniors and I talked to them and said, we need to do something, and I want to do a mail-in campaign. I don't want to do, like a survey kind of thing where you all sign something, because it's just one piece of paper. And somebody had told me at one time there was a paper plate campaign that was very successful, and I think they went to Washington. And from talking to the seniors, they came up with the prescription bags. We all get them. They're sort of an envelope shape, and if you fold them over, you can take the sticker I devised and put it on there and create an envelope. And so I created more stickers that said, raise income limits to CONPACE and those kinds of things. And then anybody that would listen to me, I went to them with my sheets of the labels and asked them to mail it out. And it was very successful. I think we got more than 1,000 of those sent to Hartford, and income guidelines got raised. And so that was like, wow, we can really make a change. And so then the Department on Aging that Bob was talking about before, we did have, and we lost, and it went away. And again, it was how do we get it back? So the same set of directors started again on how do we do this. Edith Prague again was still the senator. Well, she was the rep before, and then now she was the senator. And she explained it to us again on what to do. And we did the campaign. It spread across the state, just like the CONPACE campaign did. And we did get the Department on Aging back. And then you all just saw what happened with MSP. We really created a groundswell with that. And those examples show that a small group of people can really change things once they come together and they all buy into it.
Does anyone have any questions for anyone on the panel so far?
I heard you say about the bridges and the infrastructure. Do you like to fix things?
Yep.
Is it going to happen?
So it is, we put in, so most of that comes out of this. There's special transportation bonds and GO bonds. So in the special transportation side, I could talk about special transportation a lot, so call timeout when you want me to stop. So
I'm just interested because they had us for their fifth federal state of bridges.
Actually, we've come up from there.
So we're working on that?
Yes. So what we did was the Special Transportation Fund was primarily funded by the gas tax. Gas tax has not changed since the 90s under Governor Rowland when he decreased it. Even if it had changed and kept up with inflation, which I'm not advocating for, but if it had, we still would be getting less money because we have more energy efficient cars and we have a lot of electric cars now, so we get less money that way. And in the 80s, gross receipts tax was added on to all petroleum products. That started to be moved over to the Special Transportation Fund and is now completely in there. So that also helped out, but is not a general fund revenue. It was designed originally as a general fund revenue and is not on the general fund side. Then there was a fund, there was another tax that was on the general fund, which is now in the Special Transportation Fund. It's called a new car tax, not a new as in brand new tax, but a tax on new cars. So that has now moved over to the Special Transportation Fund. As a result of moving that over this year, it was slated to be phased over to the Special Transportation Fund, is now there. That supported the $4 billion worth of projects having to do with small bridges and roads and culvert repair and some of the other things. So then there's the talk about tolls. So I'll have to tell you right up front, I support tolls. I think it's a necessary change. And I will tell you we are one of 10 states that don't have tolls. Alaska has tolls. Hawaii does not have tolls. But around us, everyone has tolls. And so what do they use and what do they generate? So Rhode Island just started tolls for commercial vehicles. They got $20 million their first year in tolls. Massachusetts has one tolled road. Every year they get $400 million a year. New York gets $2.5 billion a year in tolls, having nothing to do with their bridge tolls. What do they do with the tolls?
Yeah.
Well, they spend it on projects and they can pay cash for them. So we can't pay cash, we bond out. So that's, and our other funds pay for the bonds, but they're not paying cash for projects. We would not lose federal money. All the states around us get federal money for their roads. We do not need 75 gentries. We can be smart about it. A third of the people that drive on our roads are paying taxes, are not paying anything in Connecticut, yet every time we are in their state, we are giving that state money, and they have about the same percentage on their roads. About a third of the people are from out of state. And with a gentry, it takes away the public safety concern that's out there, and you can set it up so that you can say, for example, we could say anyone over the age of 70 doesn't pay tolls. You could say something along those lines. You could do it a lot of creative ways. Other states do a lot of different things with it. I went down to Pennsylvania I had to go to a family friend's funeral, but on the way down, I had to pay tolls all the way down, and I didn't have an easy pass. So, and then when we were doing the funeral procession, we had to go on the highway and up and down and over because they had the burial in one other part of Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania's huge. And so we were going through gentries. I got all the bills at home. You didn't have to stop. It's much better to get an easy pass. It's cheaper. So I just pointed out that I think that there are ways that we can do this without putting more pressure on people. In addition to that, what I would really like to do is to make our gas tax competitive with our surrounding towns. And it's getting more competitive because they're raising their gas tax in surrounding towns. And why I like that, it's because what we really want is to have people stop in Connecticut and buy gas. What happens when they buy gas? They buy gas at a convenience store, they get a pack of gum, they get the newspaper, they buy a sandwich at the local restaurant, and that increases people spending money in Connecticut. And then we don't have the reputation of having a higher gas price, although when I'm in other states, it doesn't really appear to be that much different. So I just think that that's what we should do. And yes, we are fixing roads and bridges, and I think we should continue because it provides, not only does it provide a good, safe transportation system, it provides good paying jobs to people who work on roads. So I could talk more about it, but I'll end there.
Okay. Teachers has a question.
Yeah.
Cathy, I have a question as well on basically the same topic. I understand, correct me obviously if I'm wrong, there are two questions that are going to be on the ballot in November. One of them concerns lockbox for transportation. Can you please comment on that, and what are your thoughts?
So I'm fine with the lockbox one way or the other. But it is a boondoggle that the legislature has taken money out of the Special Transportation Fund. I did the analysis with the Office of Fiscal Analysis, not me. I went to them and said, show me where we have taken money out of the Special Transportation Fund. They said, we never have taken money out of the Special Transportation Fund. So I said, so why are people saying we've taken money out of the Special Transportation Fund? Well, it's a good political point. We can all say it. And nobody gets the analysis. So I said, can you draft it out for me? And so there has been no money that has gone into the Special Transportation Fund that's been taken out. What has happened, this is why we can put the lockbox out. What has happened was when we were moving the gross receipts tax from the general fund into the Special Transportation Fund, it happened over time. And it was originally, when it was being moved over, they did the analysis to see how much money would they raise. And they thought it would be $1 billion. And they, in essence, raised $2 billion of gross receipts tax. So they didn't move $160 million over. So that's where the conversation comes from. It was in money that was not moved into the Special Transportation Fund. It was not money that was in the Special Transportation Fund that came out. So the optics of the argument is on the general fund side of the budget. It's not on the Special Transportation side of the budget. And that's where the conversation comes in. I don't think that the Special Transportation Fund will change one iota should the lockbox discussion get passed or not get passed. There will still be money being put into the Special Transportation Fund. People will not move it from the Special Transportation Fund to the general fund, and we will still fix roads and bridges. So I think the other initiative has to do with land. So
Yes.
that's basically because of the project that happened around the East Haddam area, where state land was sold
Yeah.
without a real public hearing, and it will require a public hearing,
Yeah.
which it should. If we're going to say, I personally like to save land. I think that we should. Land once gone doesn't come back again, and so I personally like us having open space and keeping an eye on that and not selling it off to the highest bidder. I do think the state owns too much property, and I live in Sprague, but right down the road from us is the Old Norwood State Hospital. I don't like to see a property that sits fallow like that and just goes downhill. So I think that we should have those public hearings, but we should shed ourselves of some of those assets that are empty and we're not taking care of. We're awful stewards of buildings. Once a building starts falling down, you end up with a brownfield, and that's my real concern. On many people talk about the closure of Southbury Training School. Eventually, that will close down. The clients that are living there right now will eventually not be here. And when it closes down, I would like to see us have a plan to take care of eliminating those buildings, because if we leave them with water in their pipes burst, water goes everywhere, just not a good system. So we should get rid of some of those things. It took us 30 years to get rid of the Norwich State Hospital, and we're not quite done.
Are there any other questions?
All right. Okay. As always, I'm the fun portion. For that reason, they're not recording me. As I stood up.